Portugal is part of Spain. That's a misconception that's so widespread, it's become a meme in some circles. But what if I told you that for a long time in history, you could make that statement without being entirely incorrect? This is Os Lusíadas, the Lusíadas, Luís de Camões' epic narration of the Portuguese age of exploration. Now, throughout this book, Camões makes reference to España, but it's interesting that throughout the poem, that doesn't necessarily refer to Spain as we know it. In fact, his usage makes it pretty clear that España has quite a general meaning in his context. In fact, it seems to be a stand-in for the Iberian Peninsula as a whole. And it's not just Camões that we see this kind of usage in. The Archbishop of Braga famously claimed that he had a primage das Espanhas, primacy of the Spains. That essentially meant that he claimed that he held authority over all the Christian communities on the Iberian Peninsula. They were under his ecclesiastical jurisdiction. And even in contemporary accounts during the reign of Philip IV, we see that he wasn't exclusively referred to as Rey de España, as we would expect, but in fact sometimes as El Rey de las Españas, King of the Spains. We see that plural usage as well. So why this plural usage, and why the very general idea of España in the Lusíadas? For that matter, what does Spain mean? And what does Portugal mean, etymologically speaking? Stick around, because that's the subject of this video. Now, the best way to answer these questions is to go back into the past, way back into the past, just after the Roman Empire had incorporated the Iberian Peninsula into its realms. Now, we call that place the Iberian Peninsula, but to the Romans, it was the province of Hispania. Now, Hispania, however, is not a Latin word. In fact, Hispania seems to come from the Phoenician Ishpanim. Why Phoenician, you ask? Well, because the Carthaginian Empire, whom the Romans defeated during the Second Punic War, had a smattering of cities in the south of the peninsula, and they spoke Phoenician. So the Romans seem to have adopted this word from the Carthaginians, and that word itself has a variety of possible meanings. You've possibly heard that Ishpanim means island of the rabbits. That's quite a common explanation, but it's just one of a variety of plausible theories. There are some experts in Semitic languages who claim that it actually means land of metal forging. And there's even one theory that it is, in fact, a Greek word, Hesperia, meaning something like land of the setting sun, which would make sense, given that Spain and Portugal are in the very westernmost portion of the European mainland. So much for the etymology of Spain. Now, what's important is that after the Roman Empire fell during the Middle Ages, much of the Iberian Peninsula was fragmented into a variety of different kingdoms. There wasn't much political unity going on during that period. And we have in the center and in the north mostly Christian kingdoms and duchies, and in the south a variety of Muslim powers, caliphates, emirates, and taifas. Now, the first major moment in which the status quo was broken was the formation of Portugal as we know it today. That seems to date back to the 12th century and began under the rule of Dom Afonso Henriques, who essentially ran the county of what was then known as Portugal. Now, Portugal comes from the Latin portus cale, which literally means cultic port, and that's where the modern word Portugal comes from. So much for the etymology of Portugal and Spain. But what about that peculiar usage of Spain, or the Spains that we opened up the video with? Well, to understand that, we need to know that throughout the subsequent centuries, after more or less Portugal as we know it was formed, the rest of the kingdoms of the Iberian Peninsula gradually, bit by bit, fell under the rule of a single monarchy. But the important thing is that though they were being united under a single monarch, they actually remained more or less distinct political entities. And for that reason, if you became the king of Spain, you were really the king of all these different kingdoms, the king of Aragon, the king of Castilla and Leon, the king of Granada, etc., etc., etc. Now, if you were a contemporary and you were trying to refer to all these territories without having to laboriously list them one by one, you'll look for a shortcut. And one of the shortcuts was simply saying Spain, España, which, of course, as we've seen, could also refer to the whole peninsula, in fact, or simply refer to the kingdoms under the rule of the quote-unquote Spanish monarch. You could take another route and simply pluralize them, refer to Castile, Leon, Aragon, Granada, etc., etc., as the Spains. But this story actually gets slightly more complex with the formation of the Spanish Empire. All the territories that Spain brought under its rule across the globe were also in large part considered more or less autonomous kingdoms themselves, kind of under the model of how the Spanish monarchy operated in the Iberian Peninsula already. So sometimes you'll find contemporary documents refer to something like the collection of holdings in the Americas as Las Españas as well. So there you have it. The names of two countries that we all know actually have some pretty interesting history behind them. Stick around for more content like this, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.